Are both sides prepared to give closing arguments?
I'm ready.
I'm also ready, Your Honor.
Okay, we'll start then with the state.
Are they coming or are we just wasting our time? Are they coming or are we just wasting our time? That's what was said by Beverly Wigginton. Your Honor, you heard it. What does it mean? It means the Wiggintons' confrontation with postal employees and the Wiggintons' confrontation with the police at the post office on May 18, 2021, was entirely planned by the Wiggintons. The Wiggintons wanted the police to be called when they went into the post office on that day. What does it take to get the police called to such a location? Alarming and disturbing people and breaching the peace. Not leaving when told by employees to wait outside. When they get here, stay over here, and if something happens, come to me and I'll give you my phone. That was said by Richard Wigginton to his young daughter. What does that tell us? That tells us he anticipated something happening with the police in front of his daughter. He planned to not cooperate with the police. It was his hope that he would be arrested. How did he get arrested? You don't leave when the police instruct you to. How do you make something happen? You pull away when officers attempt to place you under arrest. What do you do if you get arrested when you want to? You have a big grin on your face as the police are taking you away. He got exactly what he wanted. Everything that happened at the Belvedere Police Department on May 18, 2021, was the plan of the Wiggintons. You heard from Trinity. She waved her dad into the post office. Now, Richard Wigginton said my daughter called me over because there was a problem. Well, how does he know that if she waves him in? Unless this was a plan. Trinity said today they weren't conducting a First Amendment audit, but in the statements her father gave on her behalf to the police she said they were. That was an unsolicited statement just handed over. What is a First Amendment audit? By word definition alone, individuals that go in and make sure a location is abiding by the First Amendments. Okay. So whether the self-appointed auditor thinks, and in this case the postal employees are violating his rights. Well, you heard he could file a grievance. He can make a complaint. Well, in this case that didn't happen. Instead he harassed and threatened the employees in the post office that he felt he wanted to record them to put them on the internet. Counsel said in his opening that defendant was simply exercising his First Amendment rights inside a public place, the post office. The post office is not for indiscriminate expressive activity by the general public. It is categorized as a non-public forum. Your Honor, see People vs. Drosset Phonetic, which I have a copy for both you and counsel. They don't allow speeches to take place in the post office. They don't allow people to sell things there. They allow postal business. That's it. The post office is not a place for a soapbox. It is definitely not a place for harassment and threats, and that's what the employees in the Belvedere post office got from Richard Wigginton on May 18, 2021. Specifically addressing the allegations in the complaint. The state is alleging that Richard Wigginton committed disorderly conduct when he, 1. would not stop recording in certain area of the post office after being told to do so. 2. When he said to Stephanie Johnson, "Do you want to get educated today?" And 3. When he followed and approached employees of the post office and disrupted their interactions with patrons. Actions and statements in the video that are on point with this. If you watch the first 41 seconds of the video, defendant and Annette are on the video. He's behind the island. You can see she's uncomfortable. She keeps looking around while she's trying to help the customer. At about 50 seconds to about 1:06, Stephanie comes out. "If you need anything else, we ask you wear masks in the building." At 1:02, you hear defendant not soft-spoken like he was here today, but very loud, and you can see Annette being disrupted in her interactions with a customer. She gives a glaring look to Mr. Wigginton instead of dealing with her customer. You see Stephanie raising her hand in a back-off motion. Why does she do that? Because Mr. Wigginton is aggressive, alarming, and disturbing. Defendant then goes off for a little bit, but by 1:35 he's back yelling from around the corner about the post office being a public place. Again, disrupting business. You can see a customer stand back. Eventually she's called over, but initially while we're having this yelling match about the post office, she's standing back. At 1:41, Stephanie, do you want me to call the police? By 1:47 you see Richard Wigginton coming around the island, so now he's advancing toward Stephanie. He's advancing toward Annette. He's again loud, but you can hear somebody say, "We have them. People without masks. Wait outside." Employees have multiple times now tried to get him to leave the post office. His postal business is done. He is not complying with their policy of wearing a mask. They gave him options where if he had business, go outside. At 2:22, do you want to get educated today? He's still inside that island closest to the clerk stations. Of course that makes Stephanie and Annette frightened. You've got a man pacing back and forth, camera rolling loudly stating, "Do you want to get educated?" That, Your Honor, is a threat. At 3:05 you hear in the background as you wait outside until no one is here, he approaches again repeating, "I'm not done. I'm not done." Your other postal employees standing there just trying to do their work. They are being told they are going to be educated, and we've got Richard Wigginton angrily marching around saying, "I'm not done." Again, Your Honor, that's threatening. At 4:47 Beverly leaves, but as Richard said, he wasn't done. Once Kayla comes back out at about 5 minutes and 30 seconds, Richard Wigginton follows her over to the side hallway while she's trying to call the police and back to the door right up on her. At 6:36 he's right behind her while she's trying to get back through the door. At 9 minutes and 20 seconds Kayla's out there. She's standing there back against the wall trying to make sure she can see everything because she's scared of this man walking around the post office. Defendant's behavior and actions are intimidating, alarming, and disturbing. Thankfully, at that point in time, Officer Brooks comes in. Your Honor, in disorderly conduct cases, the type of conduct alone is not determinative, but rather culpability is equally dependent upon surrounding circumstances. I'm taking this from People v. Albert, a 2nd District case, at 243 L. App. 3D23, and I do have copies of that also. The surrounding circumstances in this matter: Beverly Wigginton in her disdain for the mask policy was known at the post office. You heard Annette testify to this. On this day, as before, the policy was explained to her. It's clear she was waiting for it. She immediately sent her daughter outside to wave in the defendant. He was in the car, but somehow he knew there was something going on. He knew there was something going on because they planned it. Defendant came in ready to incite. The camera, once activated by his daughter, was up and ready. Defendant was not simply video recording. He was doing so with the intent to incite. Akin to fighting words, akin to a threat. The purpose of the disorderly conduct offense is to guard against an invasion of the rights of others not to be molested and harassed either mentally or physically without justification. And, Your Honor, that's People v.S. Davis, 82 IL 2D 534. Admittedly, Your Honor, being annoying is not enough for disorderly conduct, and that's laid out in the 4th District case of People v.S. Bradshaw. That's 116 L. App. 3D 421. And I have that also. But, Your Honor, just like in People v.S. Davis, our case is distinguishable from Bradshaw. Your Honor, in our case defendant's behavior was annoying plus disruptive, harassing, and threatening. Mr. Wigginton was not simply walking around the post office documenting Poster 7 or giving his daughter a civics lesson. He was pacing back and forth into the area where postal employees were serving customers who need to pay for things. Camera right up next to everyone, making them uncomfortable, causing them to be alarmed and disturbed. You saw Annette's reaction. You saw Stephanie's reaction. You saw Stephanie's body language when she said, "You're not allowed to video in here." Hand up in front of her, protective maneuver. You heard the concerns from both of them. They were worried about what defendant would do. He was loud, angry, and aggressive. He incited fear on purpose to get the police called. His actions with the camera breached the peace, 1, in that it disrupted employees' interaction with customers, 2, in that it took employees away from their day-to-day tasks, and 3, a great significance, it caused fear. Fear engenders disruption. That's a concept discussed by People v.S. Swenson at 2020 IL 124,688. Defendant further committed disorderly conduct when he threatened Stephanie Johnson with "You want to get educated today." When she told him she was calling the police, threatening words concerning the context in which defendant inaudible at Stephanie, plus an indirect threat for bodily harm as explained in Davis are harassing. Stephanie told you the effect they had on her. Again, such act is dependent upon surrounding circumstances. In this case, think of it, where you're posting the COVID mandates, you hear Stephanie talking about this postal employees are just trying to get through their day. On May 18, 2022, the ongoing, unnecessary harassment by defendant, the threatening nature of his physical actions, the volume of his voice, which even disturbed his wife, and the way this all came about made it alarming and disturbing. You want to get educated today. Defendant's words breached the peace because defendant was unreasonable and threatening, and Stephanie was compelled to hear the defendant's threat, whether direct or indirect, a concept discussed by Davis. Finally, for disorderly conduct, the defendant is charged for the way he kept approaching and battering the postal employees. It was very clear they wanted him to leave. You need to wait outside. If you continue, I will call the police. It was very clear he had nothing else to do in the post office except continue to alarm and disturb and try to get the postal employees to react in such a way that he can post them all over the internet. He aggressively followed employees. He aggressively approached employees. You saw the effect it had on Kayla standing there by herself back against the wall making sure she could see everybody. Alarming and disturbing and breaching the peace by unnecessarily making the employees fearful and making them divert from their course of business. That brings us to the criminal trespass. There are 2 counts of this. A person commits the offense of criminal trespass to real property when he remains in a building other than residence of another after having received notice from the occupant to depart. Defendant absolutely knew that the post office employers were instructing him to leave. Context. Again, the COVID with restrictions policy he's perfectly aware of. Signs from the front door on back that you can see for yourself, being told to go outside, being told he no longer has business there and the employees were going to call the police. I don't hear a very clean leave now from the postal employees, but it's very clear defendant was on notice that he needed to leave the building. When you hear the discussion of that in the background, he starts carrying on again about the masks, so he knew. The other count is for remaining on the land after Kayla Osborne told Officer Brooks that she wanted defendant trespassed from the premises. They went outside. He wouldn't leave. He was told multiple times to leave. He was given a badge number. He was told that there would be a report. That's all he needed. What did he do? Instead, he turns out and walks toward the door, and so Officer Brooks placed him under arrest. He was aware he was being arrested. He was told, "You're going to jail." His daughter was very clear on what was happening him. They're arresting him. This is not a question of whether defendant misunderstood what was happening. He didn't. Your Honor, a person commits the offense of resisting a peace officer when he knowingly resists any authorized act within the official capacity of one known to him to be a peace officer. He knew Officer Brooks was an officer. He asked for her badge on number she had on her uniform. The authorized act in this case was his arrest. Even if it doesn't really make a difference what defendant's opinion of the arrest was in regards to lawfulness. Even if this were an unlawful arrest, which I don't believe it was, but even if it were, he still can't resist it, but he did. You heard Officer Brooks grabbed onto his arm. "You're going to jail." He pulls from her. He pulls from Officer Reese. He reaches up and hands the phone to his daughter. Well, that's not placing your hand behind your back. We then see him on video on the ground. You can see he's tense. His arms are instead. Eventually, yes, he is handcuffed. Your Honor, that is resisting arrest. Your Honor, the video that you saw that was given to the police by Richard Wigginton, you saw that. You saw the surveillance video from the post office. You saw the missing convenient break in the Wigginton's videos between Officer Brooks saying "You're not leaving" and Richard Wigginton on the ground saying he's not resisting. Fortunately, the post office surveillance video fills in that gap, and what you saw in that gap was resisting arrest. You've got 3 officers there. You see shifting to the right. You see shifting to the left. And then you see everybody go forward. That's exactly what the officers described happened. And, just as he told his daughter he would, Richard Wigginton found a way to give her the phone, so she could record it, likely so he could also put that out on the internet. Every bit of this was planned by the Wiggintons, and in the execution of their plan Richard Wigginton violated the statutes of the state of Illinois with his words and his actions. I ask that you find him guilty on all counts.
Thank you, Attorney Jenks.